go to it now because Kieran Donaghy is with us this morning. Kieran, how are you?
Not too bad, Ger. How are you, boy?
You okay, hun?
I'm okay. I was trying to tell you last week there was a game where you were sitting up there with the big schneery head and you're trying to tell we were trying to come up with stuff. But sure, you might listen to this Kerry folk someday.
I will, but maybe you talked yourselves into the fact that there was a game there, because actually in that first half it looked to me like Kerry were creating enough chances to win the game and put Cork out of sight. But somehow they talked themselves into the fact that we need to sit back here and we need to be very respectful, as opposed to just going and winning the bloody game. Yeah,
well, look, the world is not in a normal place, to be quite honest with you. 2020 has been a shambles from the get-go. I think if the world was normal, Begley goes through, he sticks the goal. Tony Brosnan from 14 yards or 21 yards doesn't hit the post and chips it over the bar. Seanie O'Shea slots his free from 21 yards in the first half as well. Maybe Clifford slots the two frees that were so unlike him. Maybe his goal chance goes in. And if all that happens, Kerry win by 12 points. And when you say that, it's not being in jest, it's just looking at the facts of it. And look, Kerry got lots of things wrong, loads out in the pitch and obviously stuff on the line yesterday. But when you just look at the brass taxes and you look at the misses that are so out of the ordinary, for whatever reasons, we don't know. But if you put them simple kind of chances, and I'm talking about Dave Moran's 2 kicks as well. Dave is a fantastic kicker of the ball. When he kicked both of them, the second one maybe time I would have been kind of like, was it needed? But they're 30 yards out for a guy who kicks them, very regularly for Kerry and for his club Strand Road. So, if that happens, Kerry win by 12, but that's when the world is normal, Ger, but it's not. We're in 2020. And mad things happen.
I accept that mad things happen, right? But look, we'll talk about Dublin in more detail a little bit later on. And I know Cork are a better team than Westmeath are at the moment. So it's not quite like for like. But there's a ruthlessness with Dublin where the process just is the process, and everything that you rely on with Dublin happens. With this Kerry team, I thought that Kerry had reached that point where they were going to be efficient. And maybe, look, I don't know, maybe last year's All-Ireland final roped us or lulled us into this weird situation where we just thought Kerry were the same level as Dublin, and actually they're not. That was a one-off amazing performance in an All-Ireland final, as opposed to them having reached that level just yet. But why aren't they at that level?
They're probably just a bit off it, Ger. They're younger, they aren't as sure of themselves. This Dublin team, are very sure of their setup, about how they play, what's expected off of everyone. When I look at for Kerry yesterday, you try and look at where did it go wrong. I look at the shape, Ger, and you're kind of looking at it, and was it so much different to what we did versus Monaghan and Donegal? I don't think so. It was solid enough, 12 behind the ball, 13 at times, trying to leave David or Tony Brosnan close to goal, pushing people down to the sidelines, like most people are playing, Ger, really. Everybody's tracking their man. Everybody's going up the pitch, everybody's going down the pitch, and so I don't think it's necessarily this huge. Kerry have changed all their style and have gone from tradition, and they're getting back. Kerry are following their men, and that's the way the game is played now. All half-backs are expected to bomb forward. You full-backs that are expected, 1 or 2 of your full-backs are normally tagged to go on a burst and bring a corner forward up the pitch. So I think when you look at the shape versus Donegal and Monaghan, I don't think it was overly different yesterday. I think where the Kerry management got it wrong was the personnel. I think possibly showing them due respect, and that's beat into this year, because we're going against Cork for 100 years down here, and it's 130 years down here, and it's not easy. There's a huge rivalry there. There's tradition there. Like the Cavan Monaghan set up over the last 2 years, it doesn't matter who's going where. That rivalry is so grand and so big that it's once 2 teams take the pitch, you kind of have to leave everything off. And yes, there's going to be times where the team that are fancied are going to pile it on the team that are underdogs. But more often than not, it's tighter than expected. I turned around to Aisling, who was with me yesterday, from off the ball, and after 10 minutes, and I just said, "This is not good. This is where Kerry are going with this game is not good." They were sloppy. But the personnel change of Brino Begley and for Stephen O'Brien was a back step. Ronan Buckley is a back step in my eyes, because he is kind of seen as a third midfielder, a workhorse who'll come back and work. And And that's fine for teams that don't have, quality forwards, but we have quality forwards all over the pitch, and we have the Killian Spillans, and you start Killian Spillan in the full forward line with Clifford and Tony Braston. It allows you to bring Darren Moynihan, who's a natural half forward. It allows you to play him in the wing. It allows you to maybe look at playing a Micheál Burns, who was outstanding in the 2 league games, who was, one of the players in the championship down here, who's been knocking on the door. He's spiteful. He brings a bit of class. He's accurate in everything he does. He's the Crokes mindset. He picks out Braston very well all the time, and didn't get any game time yesterday. Your Paddy Clifford was brought on with a minute to go. Kerry's subs yesterday, Ger, were negative. Now, maybe they were forced by the situation with the black cards on the Kerry management, but it was still, there was no real, the only positive substitution we made was Killian Spillane. Everything else was defensive. Jack Sherwood on at wing forward, Jack Barry on for Breen Begley and coming back as a sweeper. Stephen O'Brien was the other positive one, but he didn't impact the game. It's not really a game for Stephen when it's that wet and it's that slippy and it's that slidey, because his game is running at you at 100 miles an hour, being so good on the ball to go past you. But, when it's that wet and slippery, that type of game, it's not overly suited to a guy like that. You need a guy that can get his head up and pick out passes. And that's where Burns was, I feel, a big loss for Kerry yesterday. But, we conceded 10 points yesterday, Ger. The shape was what it was, but we conceded 10 points, and that should win you a game every day and twice on Sundays. And the bottom dollar is we couldn't score 11 points to beat Cork in the Munster semi-final. So a lot lies with the lack of natural forwards up front, and our shape. But again, our shape was grand when we were beating Donegal well and beating Monaghan well, even though Donegal were missing 7 or 8, which was obviously a false sense of security. But we were very comfortable in those games playing that same type of style. But I just thought it was extra defensive in some of the personnel uses we had yesterday.
The personnel changes you probably wouldn't have made it would have been to the backs. It seemed like they picked themselves at this stage. So what did Mark Collins do on Tom O'Sullivan? What did John O'Rourke do on Gavin White? What did Rory Dean do on Paul Murphy to stop their influence in the game?
They tracked on. That's what they did. They were Cork were defensive as well. Cork aren't traditionally a very defensive side. But there's no one in Cork talking this morning about all the defensive shape and the defensive this and the defensive that. But that'll be all the talk now in Kerry because we got caught with it. But the one bailout the one bailout I give the Kerry management on the way they set up yesterday was possibly possibly down to the fact that there's so limited time to get used to players playing in positions with obviously this championship being run off in 6 or 7 weeks. There's so little games you can get. So maybe I think he might have been looking at this was what he was going to stick with from here to see if we could get an All-Ireland in Kerry this year. And I think this is the way he saw it happening possibly, and he was adamant and he was going sticking to that. And it didn't matter whether it was Cork or Limerick or Waterford or whoever we played yesterday in the Munster semi-final. I think he was going to set up that way to get his team used to it, to get his team used to defensive wing backs dropping back. The one part of the game that was so disappointing yesterday and where you have to look at, because in my eyes, the backs played well. Paul Murphy was solid enough. Jason Foley was very good. Tyg Morley was very good. Peter Crowley was solid. Tom Sullivan and Gavin White were your two that kind of didn't perform, and they're your two swashbuckling guys that are going to break lines and get up the pitch and cause trouble. But we just didn't see that transition from Kerry yesterday. Why, I'm not so sure, but we definitely didn't see it. So when you're asking what are Mark Collins and Rory Dean and these boys doing, they're just doing their job. They're just tracking their men. I don't think they did anything outstanding. I think Cork have to get credit in the way they won the game because they kicked everything. Luke Connolly's 2 frees were massive. Killian O'Hanlon's frees were massive. The goal was something out of nothing. They took every chance they got, and then down the other end of the pitch, Kerry were extremely wasteful, Ger. So I don't think it was overly too much to do with what Cork did against Kerry. I just think it was the way Kerry played.
Right. Is there something to be read into the fact that you can stop a team running at you if you just pack the middle third a little bit better? Like instead of implementing a blanket defence, Cork seemed fairly determined to actually stop Kerry breaking through from around the halfway line. Like, is that a reason why? I know you're keen to point to the fact that that Cork took all their scores and that maybe Kerry would have won by a big margin on a different day. But there surely has to be something that you can look at and say this is why the thing that worked so well for Kerry in those 2 league games was shut down completely, really, by Cork. And I'm talking about those defenders running forward.
Yeah, just Cork are a fit running team, and they got out in front of him. They never left themselves exposed. They never dived in the wrong areas to allow a Gavin White or Tom Sullivan break out past you. They just ran with them, and that's where the boys seem to struggle. Gavin White really made only one penetrating run where he got off Darren Moynihan, where Dara could have slipped him and he could have maybe powered through and got that goal. Kerry just needed something, Ger, to kind of spark us, and we just, Clifford shot after half time could have done that for us, but there wasn't the spark there. There wasn't too much fight there with Kerry yesterday. There was no edge, our defensive mindset kind of, it almost looked like it infected Kerry yesterday. It looked like we were so concentrated on getting back that we couldn't get forward. But that's just kind of looking at it from the outside. But when you really try and dissect it, it's just we too many fellas that aren't natural forwards on the pitch. If your natural tendency as a midfielder or a wing forward, if your natural defending tendency is to go back, Ger, or Owen, if that's your natural tendency to go back, well, then that's what you do. And you drift back and not only that, when you get the ball, you're cautious. You're going, okay, what's around me? Where am I going here? Whereas if that's a half forward and you get the ball, they're just breaking out. You saw Mayo yesterday when they got turnovers, 3 and 4 fellas bombing out, hitting the angles wide. Kerry just didn't seem to have that energy yesterday. They didn't seem to make those runs, and we gave away a lot of frees, which was, doesn't help that style of game. When you get fellas in tackles, the ideal thing to do is turn them over and break at speed. But if you foul, obviously you're never getting that chance to transition up the pitch. So look, there was just it was a malfunction, both by the players and the management on what we were about yesterday, and a malaise and that negativity. It can infect the team. It can infect the team live when you're playing, and it becomes a kind of a natural thing to just start running back and what happens is when that infects the team and you're not functioning the way you want, what's next to come is normally panic, and that's what we saw really in stages by Kerry. Panic. Shane Ryan came up the pitch, an absolute quality outfield player. I've seen him kick 1-7, 1-8 for his club, Ratmore, a beautiful footballer. He comes out the field with a goalkeeper's jersey, and you can clearly see he's been told to stay at home because he looked like he crossed the 45 and he looked like it was panic time, and he took one more bounce and he absolutely rooted the ball straight back to Cork. And he's a baller. He's a footballer. So you see other keepers when they come up, the likes of Niall Morgan, the Beggins, they come up, they look calm, they look like it's okay, it's what they're supposed to be doing. Kerry have so much of these fast backs. A way to engage them is by allowing a quality outfield player who's actually a goalie for you, who are not getting the best out of either from his kickouts or his restarts or from live play. A guy like that should be coming out. He should have confidence enough to come out. You should be getting wide with your Tom Sullivans and your Gavin Whites, and you should start looping off him at speed and use him as an extra man on the ball and be brave and attack teams that way and try and create an overlap. Because the way the modern game is going now, you're just dropping your weak side guys across. When the ball's on one side, the two guys in the weak side are dropping across the sweepers. When the ball gets transferred over to the other side, the opposite guys tuck in. So it's kind of man on man. Everybody's back there, and that's why teams will look defensive. I watched Dublin. I was at Dublin. Dublin had 15 men behind the 45 at numerous stages against Westmeath. They actually had 15 men inside their own 45, with the score being 17-6, just coming up to half time. Or they were leading by 11 points, and they had 15 men behind the 45 in the last minute of their first half. So I don't think this is a whole, all of a sudden just this defensive Kerry mindset. I just think that's the way the game is going. You have to track anybody, and if you're a corner forward and you're on a corner back and he bombs, you have to go with him.
Well, let's talk about that briefly, because before we hear from the managers, then the point about Dublin putting the men behind the ball, they put the men behind the ball, but then they attack in numbers at pace, or they establish a foothold and they kill you with death by 1,000 cuts. Kerry weren't doing any of that, though. There didn't seem to be they certainly weren't executing whatever the plan was when it came to being an offensive team when they had the ball in their hands.
Yeah, you're 100% right.
What was their plan?
Their plan was what it was in the last 2 league games, which was get bodies back and turn people over and counter-attack. That's why you're starting Bream Begley at wing forward. That's why you're starting Ronan Buckley at wing forward. And that's why you're starting Darren Moynihan in the corner. Darren Moynihan's coming out, allowing Ronan Buckley to be a third midfielder, and Bream Begley is dropping back to create another back. And what my idea was, and before the game, was that you turn them over, and then you'd be saying to the Bream Begleys and the Gavin Whites and the Tom Sullivans and your speed merchants back there, your Jason Foley's, that when we get a turnover, to go. And I think that was the game plan, Ger. You know, I'm not sure, you know, what the malfunction was obviously the way we came out of defence. We showed no urgency. We showed no willingness to sprint off the ball and get out and create space for others. You know, we were more interested in running when there was a chance that you could get the ball. And we just looked like that we know outball, we know overlap, we know when to break a line. Conditions were bad. Maybe guys were worried about taking it into contact. Maybe guys were cautious. Maybe guys didn't want. It was like a bar of soap there just yesterday, but it was a bar of soap for both teams. But like both teams played like it was a bar of soap. There was turnovers, and anytime fellas went into contact at all, the ball was flying out of it. So I think that was their plan, Jared. Just look, they didn't execute it, and as I said, you know, the management with the decision of Bream Begley was an instant kind of sign to what way we were going to go about things. And maybe look, I was showing Cork possibly too much respect beforehand, because we do know that no matter what way they're going, they're always going to bring it to Kerry and Páirc Uí Chaoimh. But, you know, maybe the Kerry management paid them too much respect as well, and paid the price for it. But, you know, I don't think it was overly different to what we've done, to what they got plaudits for the last 2 weeks. And that's my point, basically. I'm disappointed with the edge Kerry have. I'm disappointed with the focus they had. That'd be more what I'd be looking at the management for. You know, why are we so sloppy? And then the players have to take an awful lot of this on their shoulders as well, as Peter Keane and his backroom team. You know, the players possibly, I think it's nearly a 50-50 split, Ger.
Okay.
It sounds like a... Sorry, go on, Ger.
I was going to just play the audio here from both managers. So we'll hear from Peter Keane in a moment. But first, here's the winning Cork boss, Ronan McCarthy. Have a listen.
Ronan, those days are very hard to come by. You must be absolutely ecstatic with that win.
Yeah, look, we're delighted, and we're delighted for the group of players. They're a group that have been through a lot over the last two and a half years, and have come along a long journey, you know. And they, you know, look, they got their just rewards today. You don't always in these type of games, but they got it today, and I think it was merited. And I think the way they hung in when we were behind a number of times in the match, you know, it's a brilliant way to win a match, because it shows, you know, the heart in the group, and they kept fighting to the end. That's all you ever ask of a team. And it's kind of fairy tale stuff the way it ended, really, but who could have predicted it?
A huge lesson. Look, I said last year after we lost the All-Ireland, you know, you're starting at the bottom of a greasy pole again, and we're stuck at the bottom of that greasy pole now, you know. So it would have been lovely to have pushed on and progressed, you know, but look, we didn't, so we just got to go away and relook at it.
Peter, in the first half, it just looked like not the Kerry that we're used to seeing. Was it the conditions out there today, or what was it that really just didn't seem like themselves?
I don't know. Like I said to that man there, you know, the conditions were the same for both teams, you know, but we just weren't pushing on. We weren't. There was scoring opportunities. What were the scoring returns?
11 wins, and you dropped about 6 short.
So from 11, 6, 17, what did we score? 13 from 30, 13 from 30. You know, I suppose that speaks for itself.
Okay, so Ronan McCarthy and Peter Keane, they're speaking with Aisling O'Reilly for OTB Sports in Páirc Uí Chaoimh. More post-match reaction from all the GA on otbsports.com and on the OTB Sports app on our social channels.
Kieran, just to pick up on something you were saying there before we played those clips, it does sound like this was a bit of a psychological breakdown from Kerry yesterday. To use a phrase that the Dublin footballers would use, did Kerry get emotionally hijacked yesterday, basically? Is that why there was a breakdown in what you mentioned in terms of a lack of scoring and a lack of chance conversion?
I don't think the lack of scoring was down to it, Owen, because as I said, as I listed out beforehand, Kerry left 2-6 or 2-7 from relatively easy scoring opportunities. Obviously, the game is extremely different. We're probably talking about it like we're talking about the Westmeath Dublin game where Kerry, Dublin won by 11 points. And I hope people don't take that the wrong way, because if they were just normal shots in a normal game, but these were wides that you were looking at going, you were literally shocked at some of the misses. So I don't think it was a emotional hijacking on that front, Owen. I think we honestly really set up like Peter Keane saw us setting up, trying to get through to November, later on November and December. I think that's the way he wanted to set up. It worked in the 2 league games. And I think, yes, he got it wrong. I think he did. Look, he got it wrong. We were too negative in our lineup. When you've got players like Burns and you've got players like Stephen O'Brien and Paddy Clifford, even though we've seen very little from him, Killian Spillane, you really have to look at, how do I get my best team out here? And Darren Moynihan is a great workhorse of a wing forward. Such a smart player, does the right thing. He's a bit of a leader out in the pitch. I actually saw him look down to Clifford about 2 minutes after Clifford had that wonder shot that hit the crossbar. And I saw him look and he gave the signal to Clifford to put it over the bar. And, sensing that the game was a tight one, but he's going to still tell his captain, who's one of the best players in the country, to pop it over. And he was extremely he looked shocked and disappointed by taking off, because he was tackling well. He chipped over a nice point. He was getting on ball. You play him out in the half forward line along with Shawnee O'Shea, which, look, what my fear of what happened, Shawnee, happened again yesterday when you're on and a number of fellas picked them up yesterday, but in particular, Cork half-backs bombing up the pitch. Shawnee O'Shea has to follow him, and as a centre forward, when you're back at cornerback and in your full back line and around your half back line a lot, there's no out ball, there's no one to kick it to. Do you possibly look at starting him at 15 and letting him play in front of a Clifford or Shawnee O'Shea, but bringing a complete natural workhorse and a guy that loves to be back there tackling in Darren Moynihan back there? Kerry's philosophy yesterday was, as I said, was the exact same as the other 2 weeks. I just think our personnel was a little more negative than the last 2 weeks. The last 2 weeks, we'd Micheál Burns playing on one wing, and you'd Ronan Buckley playing the other wing, and you'd Ronan Buckley dropping back as your third midfielder, dropping back into the half-back line as a sweeper to try and pick up anything. And you'd Micheál Burns, who was playing at 10, but playing as an orthodox wing forward, getting up the pitch more offensively inclined. And that was my point earlier on. We had too many defensively inclined minds out on the pitch yesterday for an awful long period. And, that's probably where Kerry fell down.
When Dublin are doing it, they have a load of natural forwards who they've turned into people. So Mannion, obviously, not in the unused sub yesterday, but we've seen Mannion back at left corner back, punching the ball out and trying to be as good a defender as he possibly can. It took him a while to get to that point, and maybe that's in Sean O'Shea's future. He can add an extra bit of stamina over the course of a game to be able to do that and still run the game from half forward. But when you think back to Eamon Fitzmaurice was playing, am I right in saying he had Paul Murphy at centre forward for various stages of his, controversially? Wasn't there a summer, or was there a league campaign coming into a summer where that was?
I think he may have played it. I think he may have played it kind of. I thought it was more 10. He might have played a few games at, but.
I know what you're talking about, right? About you put him, and it's a two-man full forward line, Maria, according to the numbers, but one is the playmaker, a 9 and 10 or a 10 and 9 in soccer terms, where your number 9 is your striker and your number 10 is the creative fulcrum, and not asked to do that much defensive work. And maybe that needs to be what Kerry needed to do, but they didn't have enough. From listening to you, they didn't have enough of the ruthlessness in the players who were the defenders, who when they got the ball were like, well, that's my job done now, and there wasn't enough when they were laying it off. There wasn't enough options for them, or enough people going, it's my job to actually win this game for us here.
Yeah, look, I suppose the disappointing thing as well, like to kick on from that, the game isn't going well for you, and sometimes things don't work, and you have to be adaptable, and you have to make changes, and you have to go for things. we brought Jack Sherwood on at wing forward yesterday, like, who's a full back or a centre back. No, he's good, and he's good on the ball, and he's very athletic, and he can drive you up the pitch. But yesterday, as I said, wasn't the day for carrying the ball up the pitch as much as you normally would with how wet and how slippy it was for fellas out there. So, you have to look at that and wonder, where was the thinking on can we change it up? Can we change up the style we're playing? Can we push on a bit?
What's our plan B?
Yeah, we've got a third quarter now. Like, we've a minute and a half of the third quarter. You have another chance to kind of go, okay, this isn't really working. Now, saying that at the third quarter we were just gone down to 14 men, so you have to give the management the chance to try and deal with what way they're going to go about that and what way they're going to tackle that. And Dave Moran was very unlucky to be black carded yesterday. Like, he tried to reach around an old tackle that I used to do for Philip Beach. You reach around, you try and fist the ball from underneath the guy's arm. To get a black card for that was sickening. But we just had no. We couldn't change it up. We couldn't change it up. And but, like, Joe, we're talking a lot about
we are
philosophies and styles of play. At the bottom dollar is Kerry didn't perform in any means yesterday. If you ask the Kerry players today, put your hands up if you had an 8 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10 if you had a solid championship performance. There'll be very few hands going up, Jar. And look, unfortunately, that's, if you're going to be in that scenario, it's always going to be hard to win a game. As I said, the defenders held Cork to 10 points and Kerry couldn't score 11. So
we should talk about Cork, because all the Cork fans are like, what are you doing? We've just knocked Kerry off. What are you doing? We're miles behind them in Owen's power rankings. Talk about us. We'll talk about them a lot in the power rankings tomorrow. Don't worry, we will. We're going to make Owen revisit this in excruciating detail on tomorrow's power rankings. But what a performance from them. Like, in a game where they were getting overrun at times in the first half, you were like, goal chance, missed opportunity by Kerry, but they didn't panic. And for, like, fundamentally a young team and an inexperienced team and a Division 3 team, granted, the cream of the crop in Division 3, that was a stunning smash and grab by them. And I made the point last night that I think actually Cork are now back, and they're going to be an important force in Gaelic football for the next 3 or 4 seasons on the basis of the talent pool they have, the management style, that there's like a very clear identity for the team. Now, maybe Mark King can come and go and do a little bit of, I don't know, maybe he can do what Conor McKenna is talking about doing, having a dual summer, who knows. But, like, right now, they must be pretty happy with themselves.
Oh, yeah, they do deserve credit. Like I said, Ger, they really, if you were looking for Cork guys that could put up their hand and say that they gave a good performance, you'd have a lot more of them. Luke Connolly's introductions, Cork subs, like, Luke Connolly in, corner forward, replacing a more natural working wing forward. That was an offensive change. That was a sign that we're going to go for it a bit more. Mark Keane, out in Australia, quarantined for 2 weeks. 3 weeks to go. He hasn't played with us all year. Who cares? All we have to do is beat Kerry. Let's bring him in. Game is on the line. 5 or 6 minutes into the second half. Let's get him on. Their subs were positive. Their subs were. Michael Hurley came on and impacted the game. They even brought on Paul Kerrigan, again an offensive substitution, going for things. And we Kerry on the other side, bringing on defenders and midfielders, and only going with 2 real forwards in Killian Spillane and Stephen O'Brien. So Cork got it really good on the line yesterday. Ronan McCarthy has to give credit for that, for having courage and going after something. And they knew they had to do that to beat Kerry. Connolly came on and kicked 2 absolute rakers. The free in the first half was or the free in the normal time was brilliant, and his free in extra time was, and that's what I mean. And like, they kicked their chances, they took their chances. You couldn't say Cork were overly wasteful yesterday. They didn't miss too many chances where you'd be like, oh my God, that should have been a score. How did he miss that? They were the opposite. When you looked at certain kicks Cork had yesterday, and you're kind of like going, this could go wide, and it didn't. It split the post, and Connolly's free was huge late on, because it put the minimum between the sides, and it made Kerry nervous, and it made Kerry not being able to foul inside the 45, which in turn led to the goal chance. Because if Connolly misses that free, Ger, and Cork are still 2 points down, I think Kerry would be a small bit more settled in what we were about. Now, look, we got the matchup undoubtedly that we would want with Tommy and Mark Keane underneath the ball. I'll have to talk to Tommy. It looked like he had him pinned, and Tommy is as strong as you come across, and it looked like he'd him pinned. And when I looked at the video and I slowed it down and I went back and over it, and the only thing I can imagine is when he left go of him to look at the ball, the only thing I'm seeing is you have the lights that are up on top of that new stand in Park Equive did that because the ball was dropping out of the sky. So when he turned around, did he lose the ball for a second? Because it's very unlike Tommy, and it would be very unlike a guy that is so used to competing for a high ball to get it that wrong when it was dropping. And I'm only trying to make sense of how he didn't get a fist in it. I also have to look at the Kerry goalie. I think it was a loud, brave call from Shane Ryan. Tommy keeps holding Mark Keane, and Shane Ryan comes out like Ala Cluxton has done for years and box it out the pitch. And if Cork get it and bang it over the bar, you're set for penalties. But, the old saying in Micheál O'Hara said a high dropping ball into the square and anything can happen. And Mark Keane was brilliant yesterday. But, their backs were very good.
Yeah.
They defended well. Powter was good. Flav was good. They both popped up with points, including Kevin O'Donovan popped up with a point. Midfield, Cillian O'Hanlon was aggressive. He had that edge that Kerry didn't. He was around the place. He actually went over the top. He went in on Peter Crowley after they turned him over and he gave away their free to get a hot ball. He would have been probably better going in, giving his own guys the G up rather than attacking Crowley on the ground. Go
He
into
learned
Collins.
that, though. Yeah.
He learned that, absolutely. But the intent is there, and I don't care
and it
if
comes
it's
across
corrected the wrong way.
No, I know exactly what you mean. As somebody who would have done that yourself.
At least having that bit of edge. And their half forwards were actually quite, like Rory Dean was quite enough. Colm O'Callaghan, who were expecting big things off, was quite. So they didn't get much out of their half forward line. So it wasn't like this was an absolute rock star of a performance by Cork and they put up 2-12 or 2-14. They scored 10 points and got a draw.
Okay.
And that's the thing that'll stick in Kerry.
I want to read some quick text about this. Any chance to talk about Cork, lad, says Paddy Claw. And then Adrian McGrath says, the Cork folk complaining about talking about Kerry are reading this badly. Surely the only thing more satisfying than a Cork win is the enjoyment of Kerry's suffering. So that'll tell you just how much the Cork people are loving this morning. I want to play this clip. It's from Andy Moran. There was more than one championship game this weekend. Here he is talking about Cillian O'Connor. Have a listen.
Cillian O'Connor, your thoughts on his performance there today?
Yeah, look sharp. I think probably, even though he's the highest scorer of all time in championship history, for me, he's the most underrated player. He changed our team. He came into us in 2011, didn't start when we bringing you down memory lane, but didn't start over in London for us in 2011. We nearly lost the game. Cillian comes on and just makes such an impact to our team. He changed us from a decent team to a really good team with one player. And to me, I rate him up there with the highest. I think he's one of the best players going. And we have to admit, his form wasn't great the last 18 months, resulting in injuries, hamstrings, knees and everything. But he's won 18, scored now in 2 games. Played particularly well against Galway in the first league game. Didn't play against Tyrone, which we lost. The last 2 games have been amazing. And if he can keep that form going, we've got a real squeak next week against Galway, and then moving on, if we can get over that hurdle, moving on, he gives us that chance.
Yeah. I was very impressed by Mayo and the fact that there's a bunch of younger players who look physically prepared for the battle of championship at this point, whose skill level is as good as what they're replacing, and then you still have a bunch of the older players to come off the bench if you need them. Look, 2020 is a weird year, but it's a good combination that they have at the moment.
Yeah, it is a weird year, and it just would sum it all up. Maybe it is written in the stars, Gerard, that this is Mayo's year. You're right, the youngsters that have come in have been brilliant. Oisin Mullen in the backs, Barrett was in yesterday, Lee Keegan, they're dynamic, they're bombing forward. You've Owen McLaughlin, who's settled in really well at number 7. Cohen is solid at 6. And then you've Paddy Durkin, who's like blitzing past people and kicking scores for fun. You've Matty Ruran in the middle of the field. And I know Conor Loftus is in with him now, and he's doing reasonably well. Whether he can compete with the likes of a James McCarthy and a Fenton coming All-Ireland final, you may see him possibly moved up to the wing, and maybe someone a bit more reliable, maybe a Parsons or maybe O'Shea might, Seamie O'Shea might go out there and battle away for 40 minutes and settle Mayo in, and then maybe a Loftus might go to there. But they're really in a good place. Tommy Conroy's really settled in and looks very dynamic up front. Andy's right, and I'd agree with him. Cillian O'Connor is underrated and is a class act and is the all-time championship scorer for a reason. And he really looks powerful. He really looks fit. He really looks sharp now to me. You know, his brother Diarmuid is, you know, is an all-star. David O'Shea, that's doing a nice job of floating in between. I think he's trying to stick into full forward better than he ever has, and he does cause teams havoc, but he's smart enough to know when they're under pressure to get out there. I'd love them to try and keep him as close to goal as possible, as close to Cillian O'Connor as possible. They're the best tackling forwards in the country, just ahead of Dublin. You know, their work rate is outstanding, and the way they press up and the way they pin you in and the way they don't give you options.
Well, look, we'll get to talk more about Mayo before the Galway game. What did you make of Dublin? We're nearly out of time here because obviously the Kerry's
Dublin were just what you expect. They're so sure of themselves, Ger. You know, you were asking about Dublin getting back with 15 men as well, like Kerry yesterday, but you see when Dublin get the ball back, Kilkenny sprints out to the sideline, down along the sideline. Dean Rock has gone the other way. Callahan is coming behind them. They're sprinting out to create space for the others to come behind them. They're so sure of their game plan. They're so sure of what they're about. You know, Lehef and Bugler, when they come on, just fit into the system and look really comfortable. You know, they're able to move McCarthy back to centre back the last day. You know, Fenton is magnificent as always in the middle of the field. Kilkenny was, I don't know what you can say anything more about Kieran Kilkenny, but he was just absolute quality as well in everything he did. Power and pace and good decision making and strength. And then you know, the boys up front, they're totally interchangeable, Ger. At numerous times, the whole half forward line was inside and the full forward line, the full forward line was out. They were just on a constant axis, and they've always kind of done that. But it was the one thing I thought I saw a bit more out of this Desi Farrell setup. I don't know if it's something they've focused on or is it something that they always did and they've just kind of amped it up a bit. But there was a real, you know, Rock was out at wing forward at 10 at one stage. You know, Scully was inside at one stage. When they get that turnover, the furthest three guys out just get up and clear the road and give space for them to carry it out of defence. And, you know, they look really good. The lack of goals was the only thing that, you know, on Sky that I was kind of... but we're nitpicking. You're trying to find holes in Dublin. They're not really there, but you're just trying to give other teams hope, and you're trying to look at is there a way that this team can be beaten, and where can they be beaten, and constantly to keep closing the door on that theory, Ger. But maybe it's Mayo's year.
We'll see.
We'll see. You know, look, it's all we have to hope for now, Ger, that Mayo can get it done.
Joe Biden and Kevin Kilbane can...
Yeah, Joe Biden, it's a year for Mayo. It's a year for Mayo.
Kieran, was yesterday as a fan worse than 2011 as a player?
Was yesterday as a fan...
Because I would have those down as the two most heart-wrenching ones from Kerry's last decade.
Like, you see, I wasn't really a fan, lads. You think, like, I'm working for Off the Ball yesterday. What's this fan stuff about? Like, I have 4 pieces of paper in front of me. I have a program. I have headphones on. I'm writing non-stop. That wasn't the fan experience for me yesterday. And I tell you, 2011 wasn't a great experience either for me. So I don't know the answer to that question. All I know is coming out afterwards, the Cork fans were giving me a massive reception. They were blowing the horns at me. They were waving Cork flags at me. And it gave me a bit of a G up going down the road. Or else maybe they just didn't know it was me in the car.
Kieran, good stuff. Thanks a million.
All right, boys. I better go to my real job. Good luck.
To you. Good luck. That's Kieran Donaghy there, giving us some thoughts about the aftermath of that. And are you making peace with this now? Is talking about it, this hour of therapy has done you good?
I was definitely in a better place than I was at about 7:30 last night, when I was actually just staring at 3 little dots in front of me, and it was Arsenal versus Aston Villa buffering. I was just staring at it for about 4 minutes, and I was like, hold on a minute, I haven't seen a ball kicked here in about 4 minutes, but I better actually refresh this feed. Just staring into the void of emptiness. I couldn't tell you a single occurrence of what happened in the Arsenal Villa game last night. It was
Villa
just...
killed them. Absolutely annihilated them.
I was
Jack Grealish Player of the Year. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah, so it's good to get all these things over and done with in one day, I find. And it's good a year to have this sort of pain, I find. So, yeah, definitely nothing like this is ever going to happen again, is it? So we can be safe in that knowledge. That's the one comfort you always take from this, is that this can't possibly ever happen again. But as most people will tell you, pain is a repetitive process, and the more it happens, the more it is likely to happen again.